So this session is being run by the Dubious project, which is a project I'm also involved in. So I'm really excited and happy to see that it's coming here today. It's a data space supporting project which aims to detect and contextualize potentially harmful language in cultural heritage collections. That is the only introduction I will give, and I will hand over to the session leaders today. So Kirsten, I believe the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Georgia, and welcome also from my side to everyone here. We are happy to have you and to present you a little bit of what we are doing in the Dubious project, and then also kind of pick your brains on the very general and very faceted and layered topic that is debiasing cultural heritage collections. I'm just going to share my slides briefly to give you an overview of what we're going to do today, so that you have a little bit of an idea of what you can expect from this session. This is just loading, so just a second, bear with me, please. Sure why this is taking so long. There we are. So the title of our workshop is The Stories Untold by Cultural Heritage Item Descriptions. And you have quite a lot of our project team involved in this session today. Some of us are speakers, some of us are facilitators for the breakout groups, which we're going to have with you in the second part of the workshop. So what we want to do is to go out of this session by having gotten a better awareness and a more clear understanding of the types and layers of potential bias when describing cultural heritage collections. We will explore that on a few selected examples that illustrate those stories that are being told or not being told by existing cultural heritage descriptions. And in the breakout groups, we will discuss which aspects we would want to consider or make sure we consider when working with cultural heritage collections to help avoid either emphasizing existing bias or creating and introducing new bias. The breakout sessions will be around 35 minutes, so that will be most of the second part of the session. And before we go into the details of the session, I just wanted to briefly mention our speakers. We will have Isabel Berrego from the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision, Sophie Thijs from the KU in Leuven, and Marta Franceschini from the European Fashion Heritage Association with the examples. And then we are supported by Maria Teresa Natale and Corinne Steinschneider from the Microculture Association and Julia Welter from the German Film Institute and Film Museum. And myself, my name is Kerstin Arnold. I work with the Archives Portal Europe Foundation. And with this, I'm already going to stop sharing and hand over to Sophie for a first interactive event.
Splendid, thank you, Kirsten. And I am hoping that everybody sees here a screen showing you a QR code, which you're very welcome to scan. But what you could also do is to take your smartphone or your laptop, open a browser, and surf to the website quandr.eu. That's QANDR.eu. It will offer you the opportunity to join a session. I invite you to click that button and to join with the code 4302. 4302. Because what we thought we should do, or we could do, to land with both of our feet in the middle of the type of issues and considerations that we're going to be discussing in this workshop, it could be useful to give you a real life use case of a cultural heritage institution that despite its experience with and its specialization in dealing with biased collections of cultural heritage, um, despite its experience, it doesn't have yet all the insights in the complexity of the matters that you can encounter when you curate, when you encounter, when you perform storytelling around such collections. I'm giving it 1 or 2 minutes for a couple of more people to join. There are 11 of us already. Thank you very much for this. You can always still join once we're going via the same website. Doesn't require you to download anything, and entering that code 4302. Let me start by sharing with you this use case. It's a use case that happened close to home, at least for me, in the Africa Museum in Tervuren in Belgium. This is a museum that since 125 years is sharing with the wide audience the traces of the colonial past of Belgium and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The museum totally refurbished its setup about 5 years ago. And to celebrate both that 5 years of renovation and the 125 of its of dealing with colonial collections, they organized a series of events in October or in the autumn of last year. And you can see here in the middle of my screen the exhibition My Name is Nobody, and this is the use case I would like to discuss with you today. It's an exhibition compiled by a Burundian photographer, Teddy Mazina, who lives in Belgium but is of African origins. And Teddy Mazina was invited to dive into the photographic archives of the Africa Museum and to compile a photo exhibition. What he made was an expo called My Name is Nobody. The exhibition showcased racist images with violent words in its labeling and its description. And of course, it was the intention of Teddy Mazina to denounce the absurdity and the violence of both the images and the words. He explicitly stated that he found the language absurd and harmful, and therefore he also created a video in which the words of the labels were projected onto his body. Now, this exhibition spurred a lot of controversy within Belgium and beyond. And the question I would like to poll you on first is, what do you think instigated the big controversy? You can vote blue, yellow, purple, orange, or red. If you think it's the racist nature of the images that Teddy Mazina chose and showed, you vote blue. Yellow means that it's mostly the words, so the textual elements that offended people. Maybe you think that it's the way in which the content was offered, so making it into a cultural experience that was the issue. Or you could vote for all of the above or something else. So I see some votes coming in. Most of you are gathering that it might be the actual experience of seeing these images, reading those texts, watching the video, and realizing that, yeah, it was packed up and wrapped up as a cultural event in a way, a cultural experience indeed. You can change your mind, indeed. You can jump from one color to another. Okay, I think this is where we land for now. Overwhelming majority for the content as a cultural experience. Well, it was mostly that. Maybe you could even say it was all of the above. People were, of course, touched by the actual images. They were offended that original labels were displayed where no censorship had been applied. And then, of course, the video reinforced the impact of those words because they were projected onto a human body and then connected with the title, "My name is Nobody." But I believe that those who voted for purple got it right. And I don't know if it is because you know this example. But what happened is that people didn't understand that a whole process of curation and reflection had taken place to prepare for this exhibition, and that the cultural experience was actually meant as a show of respect for the victims of violence and racism worldwide. What the museum wanted to do is to make the topic a topic of discussion for a wider societal debate, and to really um, uh, not move out of the way of how cultural collections, how images and how words can convey stereotypes. Maybe you also know how the museum responded, because they did immediately take action. How do you think did they try to mitigate the situation? Was it to rephrase the narrative? So they just changed the paneling and they changed how the intentions of the artists were conveyed? Was it not by changing anything, but by adding more context? Did they remove some of the most controversial content, or did they have to close the exhibition? Thank you. Thank you for your votes. I see we have more mixed opinions here, but the yellows, yes, the yellows are taking over indeed. They chose to add context, and they did it by moving the exhibition kind of behind closed doors. I know that this is a contradictio in terminis, but indeed they made the exhibition solely accessible as a guided experience. So it was actually a guide from the museum, but in most cases it was the photographer Teddy Mazina himself who took on small groups of people and allowed them to completely travel the journey that he had traveled. So in that way, he was able to provide all the context that made it more insightful why certain decisions were taken, why certain things were shown, and why he himself, as a member of the African diaspora community, wanted to show and to share exactly the choices that he made. So this is the type of considerations that are very much at the foundation of why we decided to devote a project to debiasing digital cultural collections and to focus first and foremost on the harmful use of language. And I think, Kirsten, this is your cue to take us a bit deeper into that background story. Thank you all for your participation.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed also for this introduction, Sophie. We just wanted to give you a little bit of background of the project that we are currently working on. So we won't go into all the details, but we wanted to kind of at least give you some context. So the DBIAS project is currently in its second year. We started in January 2023 and will be running until December this year. And as mentioned already by the brief introduction from Georgia, our main objective is promoting a more inclusive and up-to-date approach to describing cultural collections. The project is funded by the Digital Europe program as a data space supporting project. And the expected outputs on the one hand are a tool that will be AI supported and will help to detect offensive terms and provide information on their problematic background. So it will contextualize those terms and might also include suggestions for either alternative terms or alternative phrasings that could be more appropriately used. This tool is based on a vocabulary that we have been developing throughout the last 6 to 8 months, I would say. And that vocabulary essentially kind of builds the basis for what the tool can then detect by pairing biased language with the contextual information that I just mentioned, and when available with suggestions for more appropriate terms. This vocabulary and also the information that we're going to share with you today is based on conversations that we have engaged with minoritized communities along 3 main themes, which we will go to in a minute. And we essentially have run co-creation and community engagement events with different communities where we have looked at existing cultural heritage collections and looked at the existing descriptions that they have or the things that might be missing in there. And that has also helped us to develop that vocabulary with more self-expressive metadata. The tool that I mentioned will be integrated into the Europeana.eu platform. So anyone who holds cultural heritage collections will in the long run be able to apply the tool to their collections in order to identify potentially harmful language. And there also will be kind of a user-facing part to this. So users that work on Europeana.eu will have an indication of biased terms in the display when they have been detected, and they will be able to see the suggestions and the contextual information based on the vocabulary that we have prepared. And the last part of the outputs is what we are doing today. It's capacity building, it's making sure that a broader part of the cultural heritage sector and the cultural heritage users get more understanding of the general topic of bias. And we will be producing several capacity building resources, which will remain online and available. And we will do similar events to the one that we do today with different types of audiences. And this is just a brief overview of the institutions that are partners in the project. I won't go into much of a detail here. The slide deck will be shared with you later on, so you can have a closer look at that. And with this, I'm gonna start into the examples section of today, just by introducing the different communities and collections that the project works with. We have defined 3 focus areas, migration and the colonial past, which is the focus area that the Catholic University in Leuven is working on, and the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision. We have the topic of gender and sexual identity, which is taken on by the European Fashion Heritage Association, and the topic of ethnicity and ethno-religious identity, where the colleagues at the German Film Institute and Film Museum are mainly involved in. And with this, I'm going to hand over to Isabel for the first example. And just Isabel, talk me through when you want to have the slides changed.
Sure. Thank you very much, Kerstin. Hi, everyone. I wanted today to briefly present one of the cases from our experiences here in the Netherlands, working with a Surinamese community. I'm Isabel. I'm a woman, brown skin and black hair, and today I'm wearing dark red glasses, red t-shirt, and a black jacket. I work at the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision, and we are an archive and a museum for audiovisual collections, mostly from the Dutch radio and television. Next slide, please. Between November last year and January this year, we organized 3 co-creation sessions with a group of Surinamese community living in the Netherlands, both immigrants or Dutch born with roots in Suriname. To help us in this work, we invited Sharma Suirung Singh and asked her to invite people from her own network to work and be part of the project. Next slide. And during this session, we followed basically a very simple structure. So first we had a small introduction or recap in the case of the second and the third co-creation sessions. Then we watched a video fragment from the Sound and Vision archive. And after that, Sharma coordinates some discussions about the participants' feelings and their first thoughts about the video. Then everybody together started to work on a description of the video they have just watched. And only after that, only after they have done this part, we present the archival metadata. And then after presenting how is the current description, everybody together started to compare what the community has worked in the description and what was the archival description. And then after we restart, so a new round of videos and then discussions and new descriptions. Next slides, please. And from these 3 co-creation sessions, we learned some very insightful things on how to work with the communities and that we need to be prepared for something. So first of all, we need to be prepared to deal with emotions, because it is a moment in which we are not only discussing the videos, but we are discussing what people feel watching these videos. And we also learned that so people that were participating, that has these very close ties with what is represented in the videos, is representing the material, they will have some social and some personal effect. So this is very important to take into account. And in our specific case, for the archive, and the metadata that we present, we found historical inaccuracies and many silence. For example, what is not in the images, what the narration doesn't say, what is missing in the metadata, and much more things that all the discussions that we had afterwards bring. Next slide, please. I will present now a short fragment of one of the videos that we used doing one co-creation. And you see that there is a very hard cut, and I just kept it like that because it was the cuts that I did for today's presentation, but you can find the full video in our archive. So if you can start the video, Kerstin. And it's supposed to have sound. I cannot hear.
Sorry,
when you screen shared, did you tick the box?
Yeah, I might need to stop sharing and share again. Just a second.
Apologies, Kirsten, I was just messaging you that in the chat, but saying out loud would have been more efficient.
Okay, let's try this again. Just gonna rewind to the start.
Thank you.
And hopefully that will...
Paramaribo brengen vele maanden per week rijksgenoten uit het warme Suriname naar het langzamerhand killer wordende Nederland. Zij verlaten een land waar meer dan 25% van de beroepsbevolking werkloos is en waar het leven, ook al als gevolg van de inflatie, steeds moeilijker wordt. Hun Nederlandse paspoort garandeert hun een opvang in ons land. De volwassenen, moe van de lange vlucht en van alle beslommeringen op de luchthaven, hebben nauwelijks aandacht voor het voorbijflitsende landschap. Dat ze door de Bijlmer rijden, ontgaat de meesten volkomen. Maar de kinderen ondergaan de eerste kennismaking met het nieuwe land als een avonturenreis vol ontdekkingen. Wij volgden deze gemengde groep van Chinezen, Javanen, Creolen en Hindoestanen naar het centrale opvangcentrum in Soest. De definitieve huisvesting in ons land levert toch ook nog problemen op.
Ik ga u vragen waar u in de toekomst in Nederland wilt wonen. Daar moet u eens over denken. Maar één ding. U kunt niet wonen in Amsterdam. U kunt niet wonen in Den Haag. Niet wonen in Rotterdam. En niet wonen in Utrecht. Die plaatsen zitten mutvol.
En intussen blijft Suriname leegstromen. Nu de datum van de onafhankelijkheid steeds dichterbij komt, drijft onzekerheid over de politieke situatie daarna tallozen het land uit. Van de opbrengst van hun verkochte bezittingen betalen velen de overtocht naar Nederland voor henzelf en hun gezin. Die belangstelling manifesteert zich het duidelijkst bij het paspoortenkantoor in Paramaribo, waar dagelijks honderden dat belangrijke identiteitspapier komen aanvragen. En zodra het paspoort er is en op de een of andere manier het magische vliegbiljet is verkregen, dan gaan ze op weg naar Nederland. Meer dan 1/3 van de Surinaamse bevolking zal het straks moeten zien te rooien in het koele Nederland.
You can go for the next slide, please.
Vliegtuigen uit Paramaribo brengen vele maanden per week.
Thank you. I really would love to go in a very, very long discussion about what we watched, but we don't have time for this today. So I'm gonna just present two extra slides. This one that you can see now has the archive metadata for this video. So it is the original and current metadata that you can find. And I wanted to bring it to your attention, the fact that the only reason present here for the number of Surinamese people moving to the Netherlands is high unemployment. So there is no indication of other factors. That's, by the way, it is in the video. So you can hear the narrator saying other reasons for this to happen. Such as the economic difficulties, or it is not even mentioned here that the Suriname was becoming independent from the Dutch. Can you go for the next slide? And now this is the result that we got from the community about this video. So you can see what they proposed at the description for this video. And again, just to remind you, this was before reading what was the archival description. And again, I want just to highlight some points. Already in the title, there is a reference for different reasons for the immigrants to leave their home country. Also, the participants wrote a brief but much more accurate description of the video, connecting their personal experience and knowledge and what the video describes. And the participants voluntarily present a number of such terms that could help the findability of this specific item. As I said before, I really would love to go in much more in-depth discussions about the video, but we really don't have time for that now. And I know it was a very short glance of what we could experience here, but I'm gonna just invite Sophie again to keep going with our presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel, for handing over. I hope that the slide deck is charging correctly and you can see my slides. I wanted to present to you our KU Leuven community work together with the KADOK archive, which is a university archive on religious and societal history that contains many funds from the missionaries from the 20th century who went out to the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's in the scope of these kind of collections that we decided to work with the Congolese community, both in Belgium and in the Republic of Congo. We were very happy to have the help here and the facilitation of Dr. And Professor Donatien Diboué, who works at the University of Lubumbashi, and of the Congolese Intellectual Circle, which is an association based in Belgium that works with the Congolese diaspora community in becoming more visible in the societal fabric, supporting economic activities and especially also cultural activities, the cultural presence, so to speak, of the Congolese community in Belgium is to be enhanced. With our KU Leuven team, we went for a community collaboration along 2 tracks. The first of which entailed activities in the Republic of Congo, where a team of the professor went out into villages to elicit stories from locals with regards to a selection of historical images from the Leuven KADOK archive. So what we wanted to do is to totally refurbish, if you like, the metadata to certain pictures by collating, gathering and collating stories from people who actually live in the places depicted and in some cases had vivid or embodied memories of the colonial past. On the other hand, in Belgium, we collaborated with the Intellectual Congolese Circle and a focus group, representatives of the community living either first, second, third, fourth generation in Belgium. We had a series of co-creative sessions with them in which we also used KADOK archive pictures, but also images from Europeana. And it's about this second series of workshops, so the ones taking place in Belgium, that I wanted to speak to you using 2 Europeana examples that came up. It was during our first workshop that we asked the participants individually to take their pick from a Europeana gallery. So this was a small selection of images pertaining to some extent to the Congolese culture. It was a gallery that I put together using the Europeana Gallery feature, which is a tool that any visitor to the website europeana.eu could use. I made this gallery public. I showed it to the participants and I asked them to pick one image that attracted their attention and to analyze their feedback on potential stereotyping and biasing. And I must add to this that when I was compiling the gallery, of course, in some cases, the bias or the stereotypes were blatant. You could see it in the image, you could read it in some of the inappropriate terms that were used in the metadata. This was very clear. On the other hand, I also found some images that made me feel like I didn't have enough context or insight into the community's traditions and culture to really assess whether or not stereotyping was taking place or whether or not anything was deemed inappropriate. So the examples that I will show to you were to a certain extent surprising to me. as being determined by the community members as expressing bias on different levels. And the first one here is a large relief that was photographed and annotated, as you see here, as Scènes de la vie congolaise, femmes et enfants. So scenes from the life in Congo with women and children. Now, this was one of the images where I myself was, I was unsure, I must admit. So I find it a beautiful artwork. I don't see an immediate case of bias in the wording. Also, not something that I've considered really offensive in the image, but it was picked up by several individuals in our community focus group as being completely insulting and derogatory. And they situated the bias actually in the interplay between what is depicted here and what is said in the metadata. They felt that this image is portraying that the preponderance of activities taking place in the Congolese community when it regards women and children is actually to breed a family. It's even suggesting to them that the little girl on the right with the baby on her arm might be old enough to be a mother herself of such a small child. If you see correctly, all the other women depicted here as well, they somehow allude to pregnancy, having a range of children, more than one child, and occupying themselves all day with feeding those children and uh, trying to regulate the household where a large number of offspring is to be managed. It's this one directional view, this or this monofocus, if you like, that they deemed extremely offensive. In my second example, and I'm trying to, yes. In my second example, it was clear to me from the description, une beauté congolaise, a Congolese beauty, that we have a case here of positionality. So the photographer clearly was kind of beautifying this sense of, you know, the black beauty, the distancing also from a human being that is depicted here to almost an object of reverence. Now, the community members, of course, acknowledged this, but they added another layer of bias. Namely, apparently it is totally not natural, or it's totally not authentic for any Congolese woman to expose her chest like this. So it evokes, or this picture is suggesting that this is the natural composure, the natural order of things, but in fact it is highly stereotypical. And this woman wouldn't have posed like that for any picture or for any public audience if not asked or forced or made somehow to do so. And this to me was an added layer of issues with this specific image that I wouldn't have been aware of without interacting with the community group. We asked community members to write down some of their reflections, and in the examples that you see here, you see on the left side the mixed feelings that the participant had on the bas-relief that I showed in the beginning, because on the one hand, the women are depicted as being really well taken care of with beautiful clothes, with their refined and their elegant movements. But on the other hand, it's clear to her that the intentions of the image are different than only a celebration of beauty. The lady on the right was the one, she was actually the oldest participant in our focus group, and she particularly was offended by the bare-chested woman, rendering her into a sexual object. This interplay between the metadata and the image, where the bias kind of emerges out of the interplay, is something we also saw in the CADOC collections, where you see this kind of joking metadata talking about how the people depicted here are posing in front of their spacious villa. So if you would look at it without a text, okay, already it would be an image conveying kind of a hierarchy and a certain dominant position of the colonizer. But when you read it together with the text, the bias gains dimension and depth. The same happened here. A meeting with a Congolese king and a representative of the white governance structure in the republic, and on the back of the picture it is a so-called quote of this king, of the Congolese king, who says, "We are in our relationship with the whites as little children. We can do nothing without them." So what looks like, you know, kind of a documentary image gains a really deep and dark layer of bias when the metadata comes into play. Those were my examples. Thank you for your attention. Marta, I believe
yes,
this one's for you.
Unmuting myself, and I'm going to share my screen in a second. Can you see it? Can you see the screen?
It's
yes,
still white.
It's white though.
Yeah, I'm having issues with, I think I need to ask someone to share their screen for me because I'm having issues with Zoom today. Kirsten, can you step in?
I'm fine sharing my screen again. Just
Thank you so much.
And we go up here.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. I'll just introduce myself while we wait. My name is Marta. My pronouns are she, her, or neutral. And I am white. I wear my very bleached hair in a bun today, and I'm wearing a black top. I am a representative of the European Fashion Heritage Association, and with the association, together with another association from Rome, we are in charge of developing conversations, I would say, with individuals part of the LGBTQA+ community. And we worked both in London and in Rome. And this means that we are focusing on reflecting on two different languages and bias in different languages, how they present themselves in different context in relation to the languages that we're looking at. Next slide, please. I won't just talk that much about the methodology that we've used to develop these conversations, because I think that it's very familiar after the examples that both Isabel and Sophie presented. What we tried to do was to create safe spaces where people could come together, people who identify as part of the LGBTQA+ community could come and share their opinion on issues related to language, specifically in connection to cultural heritage and kind of historical artifacts, if you like. So what we decided to do from the beginning in terms of being effective in the project was to speak to the very vocal community of museum and institution practitioners and operators that are active in London and are part of or connected to Queer Britain, the collective Queer Britain. So that's where we hosted a couple of events. First, next slide, please. And the events were based on first and foremost a presentation of the project, a short introduction to the aims and the possible outputs, which are, yes, the AI tool, but also some sort of more awareness and maybe guidelines in terms of using a more inclusive language, and even rethinking about collections and artifacts in collections. And then we used Europeana EU, so the platform and the content, the 80 million. We browsed a good part of the 80 million items using keywords that emerged through conversations with the group. Next slide, please. On the screen, you see a photograph of a screen with a Mentimeter on, which was one of the tools that we used to kind of pick out some of the words that could be listed as problematic in cataloging. And probably from a very first glance, you can get that it's very hard to find some of these words are probably never used in cataloging and will never appear in cataloging unless they are connected to the subject matter, or maybe they are appropriated by the community themselves, creating the artifacts. Words like faggot or tranny, and I'm sorry I'm saying that I'm loud, but these are examples that came out because at some point the community itself appropriated some of these words to create artifacts that can be found in Europeana. So these words, we realized quite quickly that they wouldn't come up, so they wouldn't be useful straight away for the build-up of a vocabulary, but at the same time were very important to highlight the fact that some of these issues related to identity, gender identity, and sexual identity were often hidden away or didn't come up. So the fact that we realized, and the conclusion was that the fact that these words, that problematic word, don't appear in catalog entries or in metadata doesn't mean that there's no bias. The bias here is the invisibility of these stories, or the fact that these stories were hidden through other words that maybe were used as proxy to indicate some of these relationships. One of them is good friend, and I'm just talking about the English context here, but we've seen that buoni amici, which is the Italian translation, was also used to describe potential same-sex relationship. Next slide, please. This is one example. This is an illustration that depicts the ladies of Llangollen, a couple of ladies that lived together in a city in Wales at the turn of between the 18th and the 19th century. That whenever nobody knows what kind of relationship they entertain, so it's very difficult to even give a one-sided definition of who they were and how they lived their lives. But definitely one of the words that keeps coming up is good friend, and good friend was also used to define relationship, same-sex relationships that were actually proven. So in a way, what the conversations highlighted was the fact that we really need to find some keywords, and it's very hard to pin down the keywords to unearth some of these stories. And the community itself felt that it's necessary to list all the words, good and derogatory as well, and give them visibility in order to some sort of highlight this fact that in many cases these stories were hidden away. Next slide, please. So in terms of the work, and I think I've already finished my time, but I'll be quick just to show you a few examples. we did some research on Europeana. We did a sort of virtual tour of Europeana, trying to cherry pick some examples that could prompt to telling expanded stories. I don't want to say alternative, because they're not alternative, but they're part of a kind of a more complex way of, you know, making history through art. That could be a potential, you know, output or a future development of the field. And we've highlighted some themes in which these objects can be kind of read into. One of them is definitely historical awareness, and the awareness of having to deal with history, thinking about the context and the historical context, so the context where these artifacts were created, and how, and with the context when these artifacts were described or included into some narratives. Here, the example that comes to mind is the Trojan column. It's a column that's in Rome, and apparently there's in one, it's completely sculpted, and in one of the little scenes, and you have a detail there, apparently depicts two men embracing or kissing, which prompts reflections on how widespread this kind of relationship could have been and how it was defined in ancient Rome. Of course, not with the terms of today, but maybe it was more normalized. So, but this story has never been told when someone approaches the Trajan column. That's not a narrative that's been present for many, many years. And now it's starting to become one of the things that is included in the narrative surrounding the description of these objects. Next slide. Another theme, which is kind of connected to the idea of invisibility, is rediscovery, or the possibility offered to by cultural heritage to tell stories in a different way or under a different lens. Here is a picture of Michelangelo, the artist. I don't want to say just sculpture, but it's probably best known by his sculptures and paintings. Michelangelo was also a poet. He used to write poetry, and his poetry had very often homoerotic themes. This is very hardly told when the story of Michelangelo is told, also because his very nephew deleted or hid away some of this content. Then this content was kind of restored, but at the same time, the narrative and the storytelling around this incredibly important figure in Western art and global art, I would say, a part of a missing, there's a very big missing part that could be rediscovered if the very metadata or the very description of the objects in museum collections could include references to his very open preferences. Next slide, please. Accuracy is definitely another theme that came up when we realized that when we are in front of objects that are connected to LGBT queer heritage, things get a little muddy and they're very hardly ever accurate. The two images that you see on the slide here are depicting Queen Christina of Sweden, who was a very interesting figure because she inherited the throne when she was 8 years old. She was kind of brought up almost as in the tradition of a male heir. And she actually, it's very difficult to say how she identified, but definitely she used garments, that she used clothing to move in between traditional definition of femininity and masculinity. And even in her style and in her actions, she kind of took up different identities, trying to move around and move away from a clear-cut definition of gender identity, but these stories are hardly told, and they come out more from the images and the kind of portrait that we can patch up of Christina through cultural heritage than from the stories that are written and the metadata and the way in which these stories are told, even in museum records. So accuracy is definitely another thing that that came up. And next slide, please. And then the last one is representation, which is connected to interpretation, which is another kind of highlight of the discussions that we had with the community. On the slide, you see two images. One is a depiction of a pendant representing a mermaid. And the other one is a picture of a sculpture of Diana or Artemis, the goddess of a hunt. Both these, I decided to close my very small recap with this because these two objects, or the images that they represent, have been used or understood by parts of the communities as representing them in history, specifically the trans community kind of looked at the mermaids and mer people as potential representatives of their story. But clearly this is not something that has been ever included in narratives or in exhibitions including these kind of objects. It's something that just now starts being kind of revealed through a new interpretation and through exhibition projects and display projects and books that actually tell this alternative story. And Artemis used to be, she's the unmarried goddess, and she used to be a symbol of women empowerment, and now she's been reclaimed as a symbol of the asexual community, because even assumptions and even the value that these objects and the stories that these objects might allow to tell changes according to times and according to how the community responds to them. So these were just a few of the examples that we discussed, and it's been very hard to find words to populate our vocabulary, but the incredible richness of conversation that we had around cultural heritage really told us that storytelling is the way forward to kind of prospect and even create a more inclusive and expanded scenario in which communities feel represented through the rediscovery of historical artifacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. You can see with the examples that the colleagues have presented that there's so much detail that we could probably kind of have just one session only with one example. But we wanted to give you also the breadth of differences in terms of bias types and layers of bias. And unfortunately, we'll have to cut down a little bit on our interactive part, but we're still going to do that. And for this, I'm just going to invite Sophie again to briefly present the exercise that we're going to do in the breakout groups.
Thank you, Kirsten. What we wanted to do is now make the session full circle by, first of all, asking for all of you to jump in and to help us out with a use case of our own that is unfolding, where, of course, we are hoping to do justice to everything that we were able to do with the communities, as well as the inherent value of the cultural collections that we've been working with. Now, the idea would be that at the Antwerp campus of our university, we would open later this year in autumn a physical exhibition. Probably, because everything is currently up for discussion, probably we will focus on the colonial collections that we've been using in our community activities, perhaps a combination of Europeana images, but definitely containing the Kadok images as the ones that I showed you before, the one with the king and the one with the people in front of the local village house. Now, of course, we want to do it justice. We want to make it as representative and as accessible and as expressive as possible. And we would like you to help us think and consider the storytelling with these kind of collections and the kinds of issues that we've been bringing up in our previous presentations. We don't know your expertise, of course, but we would welcome any input at all on how we can display these images, how we can contextualize them, how we can label them, how we could set up such a physical experience, showcasing the images as such, but definitely also shedding light on the process we went through together with community representatives. How can we do this in an optimized way? What would be your 3 key recommendations for the exhibition team? That's what we're hoping to gain from this breakout session. Next slide, please. This is just to give you, an inkling of the space in which the exhibition will be set up and the way in which we plan, or we could plan to display the images. It's a previous exhibition that we presented at the same campus in Antwerp, where you see that we have a large 17th century space with these marble 2-color floors. And we have some large panels in a shiny plastic, a shiny PVC aluminium framed board, so to speak, where images and texts and whatever we like can be displayed. We also have the opportunity to include some stands or some physical showcases where maybe we also include some analog material. All of this is to be decided. Next slide, please. I'm not thinking of a huge exhibition. I'm thinking about a selection of 20 images, probably black and white, prints from a digital record, of course, to the highest possible quality and on a large format. What we can do is include also the pictures that were produced during our community activities, especially the storytelling, the story eliciting effort in Congo, where the local interviewers rephotographed some of the scenes that you could see in the historical pictures. We want to give due diligence both to the photographic qualities of the images and to the potential issues with them that we addressed together with the communities. And we also want to shed some light on the way in which we approached that effort. We have these mobile panels to play with, and we even have a corridor next to the main room that I just showed you. It's an old cloister gallery that we could also consider using. So maybe we split up the images, or we use the historical ones in the historical space, the newly produced ones in the corridor. All of that is possible. We even have a separate space for audience activities. Next slide. What we would like you to consider in the breakout group are these 3 questions. How do you think we can involve the communities in the preparation of the exhibition? Are we going to work again with the focus group? Should we search for a wider contingent of representative community members? Do we let them? Do we ask them to curate the whole exhibition or part of it? This is what we're asking you to consider firstly. Secondly, which would be good ways to represent the different points of view that we're trying to convey? And finally, as for the narrative, as for the text, as for the actual storytelling, which angles could we or should we explore in your opinion? Are there any larger themes or any very specific entry points into this story and into this history that you would recommend that we highlight? That's the setup of the exercise, and we have a Jamboard prepared to either keep track of conversations, but definitely to distill 3 recommendations that we can bring back to the group. Over to you, Kirsten.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said, we will have to cut down a little bit on the time that we have left for the breakout group. So we will have roughly 20 minutes, maybe a little bit less, because we also want to give people the possibility to at least mention one of their points back to the whole plenary. So I will ask our colleagues at Europeana Foundation to just start the breakout groups, and hopefully we'll find each other in that setting, and then we can get started.